Hey YouTube, welcome back to EagleX TCG, and we're coming at you with another piece of Gundam card game content. Today's video will be a video on how to beat Green Blue 1 Year War Aggro. You guys really liked the last one, so once again we'll be going over a brief synopsis of how the deck works. We'll be going over how to best build to combat this deck, and then what you can do while you're playing against it to best hedge your chances. So that being said, I want to let you guys know that we are within 1,000 subscribers away from that big 10K. So if you like this sort of content, make sure you go down and like the video so it thrives, and even subscribe for more Gundam card game content in the future as we reach that milestone. All right, let's hop into it. So just like before, we're gonna have a brief summary of what this deck's main mission statement is, and then we're gonna go down to some deeper pieces. But if you want a full 30-40 minute breakdown of this deck, topping deck lists that employ its strategies and whatnot, there is going to be a link in the description to my new type insight for the Green Blue 1 Year War deck, and so that'll be there. And before you guys get down in the comments and start hounding on me, yes, I use you for blue. That is because outside of mini games such as, I don't know, Dragon Ball Super Masters, One Piece, Digimon, Dragon Ball Super Fusion World, and yeah, Magic the Gathering, there have been a lot of games of both blue and black, and it's just what I'm used to creating content, so that's the way I typed it out here. All right, cool. Past that, now this deck, this Green Blue 1 Year War Aggro deck, comes down in a couple pieces, but basically it is the hardest, purest line of aggro that we currently have in the game. How it accomplishes this is by having a concentration of low to the ground 1-drops that can flood the board, right? And just those alone, once your EX base is gone, will start taking your shields in mass. However, if you do happen to employ a base, this is where the pilot Char comes into the mix. Char can link with anywhere between 2 to 4 different units in this deck to provide high maneuver, meaning unblockable attacks that range between 5 and 6 AP, allowing you to punch through any base and allow your tiny low weenie rush to keep aggressing through your opponent's shields. But wait, there is more, because yes, Char does allow you to get over blockers, but in case your opponent just plays out a blocker and you don't have a Char, you don't have anything to link with, that is what the second pilot, Amuro, is for. Amuro will end up turning a blocker sideways as long as it has 5 or less AP, allowing the rest of your cards to punch through it. And that's going to be pretty much how the deck works. Flood with bodies. If you have a base you need to get through, use high maneuver. If you have a blocker you need to get past, use Amuro. And then the last pieces to round off this puzzle are token generators. This deck can indeed make tokens, and then after making tokens you have to deal with not one body but 2 bodies, or sometimes you deal with a body and then a token comes out as well, allowing more bodies to hit the board, allowing more shields to be depleted each turn. Round this off with the fact that this same high maneuver that gets over your blockers to get into your bases is high maneuver that can finish you off when you have no shields. Yes, this deck is formidable and can kill people as early as turn 4. But now we're going to break down the cards that you can use in your decks, and actually in this case, more importantly, which decks you can use to combat this menace. Okay, so when it comes to fighting this deck, right, I think one of the hardest things to get most people's heads wrapped around is that, unfortunately, this is not a matchup that can often just be overcome by changing the way you're playing the game as well as your skill level. When it comes down to it, archetypes very much so matter. And I don't mean archetypes as in whether you're playing Wing or Academy or Unicorn. I mean archetypes as decks in general. Like you have aggro, you have tempo, which can kind of split the difference between aggressive and mid-range. You have mid-range, and then you have control/ramp. These are the things that really matter, because at the end of the day, aggro is at the lowest to the ground side of this like just spectrum, and the further you get away from that over to the control side, the harder it's going to be for you to deal with this sort of threat, mainly because of the fact that your decks operate in different spaces. I see plenty of times the comments or, you know, the posts in the Facebook group saying, well, how do I beat Green Blue Aggro with my green white wing deck? The answer is, unless they brick, it's not really a great matchup for you. Their deck is actively made to operate in the turns that you do the absolute least as a deck, and that is going to always trump your techs that may not come in until too late, your techs that you may not draw, your skill level, because at the end of the day, your cards, just the levels and the costs, are doing things way too late for what this deck is trying to do. And if you do tune your deck too far to hit the lower side of this, you are likely sacrificing the matchups that made you want to play this deck in the first place. So when it comes to this, before you even get to the table, your deck choice matters more than anything when it comes to this matchup. So if green blue aggro is plaguing your locals, or if it's going to be saturating the event that you're going to, if you have the read, then you probably should be staying away from green white traditional ramp decks, or white blue blockers, because in a lot of cases white blue blockers also is a bit too slow for this deck. So yeah, that's the first part. Now once you are in the specific colors though, colors being things like red, colors like white, these colors do have a bit of tech against this sort of deck. So when it comes to attacking this sort of deck, the main thing is controlling their board. This green blue aggro deck does not have a lot of sustain. It is not drawing a lot of cards. It doesn't have cards that replace themselves. Those are very rare for this game in general, but they're just simply not in the colors. Well, not in green anyway. And then when it comes to blue, the deck really doesn't have too much room for draw power. Sometimes they will have bases, sometimes they will have show of resolve, but in a lot of cases, these cards are absent from these builds. Now, when it comes to this, there are a couple different avenues that you can go off of. First avenue is going to be the low to the ground blockers. This is basically Ilfrith, Zawart, and moreover, not just low to the ground blockers, but low to the ground blockers that can take a body when they block. Zawart is nice, but lots of the time Zawart will trade with the unit it's blocking. It won't take it. Ilfrith will definitely take it, and I actually remember that comment. Somebody was telling me what it was pronounced in Japanese. I only watched it in dub, so that's my bad. But basically Ilfrith will take the card, the 2/2, with it. It'll block the 2/2, it'll kill it, and it'll still have 2 HP left over. That's what makes Ilfrith such a good card versus this deck, especially when you have the EX resource by going second and you can play it as early as turn 2. This is really going to put a damper on them, because effectively on turn 2 you're cutting off the only attack they're coming into you on their turn 2 with. On turn 3 you're cutting off half their attacks if they have 2 bodies on the board, and so that is really where the power of this card lies. Now when you're asking about what Ilfrith and Zawart are trying to fight against, this is going to be the suite of 1-drops that you can see up here on the screen. You can see things like Zaku 1, you can see things like Zaku 2, Zaku 2 again, you see the DOP, you see GM. These are all cards that really sit on the board and help gum up things, help make sure that you can put them down the board easily without like really hesitation, and then go off in your opponent's shield area. You even play things like Gun Tank. It's on the screen right now, I just forgot to say it, but the point is, these are the cards that are going to be able to come down just for 1 resource and then be able to just punch out things. Ilfrith will take all of these on no problem and have HP to spare, and that's why Ilfrith is good. As you can see with these numbers though, Zawart only takes half of these with it without dying itself. The other ones will pretty much have to go and get punished by they will have to go and get, like, they will punish Zawart just for turning sideways, and so that's pretty much the thing here. Now the next thing that is going to help though is going to be, I believe, repair. Now repair is cool because most of these things are going to be weenies until you get to some of their bigger, chunkier items, and when it comes to said weenies, you are going to be able to eat them and then repair the damage. A gun tank with an Amuro is going to be cool because you will be able to destroy anything that they put out and then repair half the damage in most cases for those weenies. You will also be able to do even more things if your deck is kind of built a little different. Like, I know personally, I love the combination of Gun Tank and Sayla, and so if I have those, you have repair 2 on a unit, you swing into a weenie, it literally just heals the damage that the weenie did to you, and it gets rid of the weenie. On top of that, you have Gundam from the main set that'll do these things, or from the starter deck that'll do these things. Repair 2. The main set gets repair 1. So you basically, repairing is going to go a long way against this sort of deck, eating up their low threats, managing their board while maintaining a healthy board of your own. Now that we have gone past that, the repairing only works best when you have a lot of resting in your deck, because if you don't have a lot of resting, you have to wait for them to rest their own units before you can swing into them, i.e. attacking and doing the damage they were meant to do. This is not the way you want to do it. There are so many cards in this deck that come to the board that do not have the ability to link, meaning they have to be out for a full turn to then go sideways the following turn. So when you have an effect like Gun Tank pairing with Amuro, linking with Amuro actually, you will rest 2 bodies, be able to swing into one. As long as you have something on board that can swing into the other one, you've cleared their board. And outside of a linking pair, they have to play out bodies that do not swing the following turn. This momentum can cascade into you stabilizing. So a lot of effects that rest, such as Amuro, such as Gun Cannon, it's a little bit later to the party, but cards like Unicorn, Destroy Mode, they also work. It's just that by that time, you should firmly know that you're stabilized if that's the card you're playing. Every now and then it comes into effect. I like cards like Nail Argama. It's a cool base that establishes itself, but then it's also going to rest something, most things in their deck that you can swing over afterwards. So yes, resting things and swinging over them is great. Resting things and swinging over them with repaired units, better. And then you have the last part that I think is going to be good, which is attacking active mode cards. Now, this does not get to be done with every deck. I will point that out. In some of the decks that we're used to being able to attack active mode cards, it comes out a little too late, which is Wing. Wing Gundam from the starter deck can attack active mode cards, but by the time you're getting that out, you got some other problems to worry about, as they are likely putting you into the grave in the next turn or so. But as much as we like to meme on that deck, Atherin is a good pilot, and in his respective deck will allow quite a few things to attack active mode cards. And this could be, again, the difference between victory and defeat. Attacking active mode cards generally means you can pick off these cards before they can swing the turn after they are played, and basically make sure they never impact your life. So these are all good cards that you can use to better help these strategies, but these cards don't exist in every single deck, and they don't generally exist in the same place. I do have my blue-white Federation deck that has Ilfrits, and it has a lot of repair in it. That deck list is on my Patreon, but at the same time, if the video with it playing, the match I uploaded, gets up to 200 likes, and I think it's only like 20 likes away, you can just get that deck list on this page as a video for the free. So it is what it is. Go like that video, small plug. But at the same time, that deck has blockers, that deck has repair, and so it's apt to deal with this. It's actually one of my preferred matchups. I do like playing against this deck with my pet deck, but red-white decks can also get there, being able to attack active modes with Elfrith. There's a couple other effects in the Zaf specific decks that will be able to do that. You have the white-blue blockers that have the ability to chain blockers. Too many blockers for simply an Amuro to get rid of. You're gonna have to start swinging with high maneuver and hope that you can maintain that ferocity. But when it comes to decks like, green-white wing, they don't play enough blockers to just sustain a huge wall of blockers. Like, you'd have to draw a little funky to be able to do that. So not every deck has it, but there is a final way to get through this, all right? And I think this is the deck that best handles this, and that is going to be damage through effect. In a lot of cases, damage through effect can supersede the need to rest, the need to swing into. And between all the little 1 damages that we have in the game, there's quite a few ways that blue-red tempo can get over this sort of deck, especially if you're playing defensively, especially if you know what you're trying to do against this deck. Burning it can be the way to go. Now, the only issue is that a lot of these cards that do some ping damage are going to do them after they've rested. And if they've rested, Well, then they generally have already attacked you and you're kind of just playing defense, not offense. But when you start adding in certain cards that can do damage regardless of whether they're rested or not, or when you're pairing Kshatriya with a cyber new type, there's a lot of cool ways to ping things for one, ping them for one again, and get rid of them. So blue-red tempo is just able to come heavy with the actual removal of these weenies, because 2 HP is not a hard stat line for them to wash, and that is going to be why that deck I think has the best matchup versus this green blue 1 year war aggro deck, simply because they have the ability to pick off most of your board with relative ease while maintaining their own momentum. And realistically past that, that's what you can do with your decks. These are a bunch of cards that work specifically well against this aggro deck. Notice most of them are cheap, most of them come out fairly early, and that allows you to contend with how fast this deck is. And yeah, that's pretty much that. So real quick, we are going to go over and talk about what you can do while playing. And yes, unfortunately, like I was saying, this matchup is very dependent on how your deck is made to operate, the speed and the areas of the game in which it thrives. So a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about while we are in this next section is going to be assuming that you're playing a deck that's compatible with the early game aggression of 1 year war aggro. But it can still apply to your strategies even if you aren't, because yes, this deck does have some glaring holes that you can exploit or that RNGs can exploit. So yeah, let's talk about it. So by the time you get to this point in the video, whether you know it or not, you probably are vibing this video if you're still here. And if that's the case, I would love it if you went down and gave this video a like, because it helps the content thrive, and then a subscribe if you want to join the EagleX fam and help us get to that magical 10,000. Now, the only other thing I want to plug real quick is that if you want to see me do anything other than card games, such as video gaming, talking about anime, talking about manga, all these nerd things, go in the description, check out Universe X, my second channel. That's where all of those things will happen, and I'd really appreciate your support on another channel as well. Now let's get back to the breakdown of this aggro deck. Okay, so let's talk about how you best play against this deck. Now, there is going to be a predominant name of the game, and of course, like everything goes under the umbrella of staying alive. Obvious, duh, you're facing an aggro deck, stay alive. But the most important thing to note is that this deck, again, does not have a lot of sustain, does not have any draw power unless they tech in Show of Resolve. And what this means is that you can outlast them. Your shields are the most important resource of any game, but in this game you can almost disregard their shields to an extent. The priority, in my humble opinion, will always be board and then shields. Get their board off the map, and then if you so choose, attack their shields. Whittle them down to a point where maybe they have 3 shields left, and you can flood the board eventually once you stabilize and take them all in one go. But here's the thing about this sort of deck, right? If you have 3 bodies on board that all have 1 to 2 damage, right? 1 to 2 AP, a singular 5 cost or 5 HP based will stop them from swinging. They will literally have to put all 3 bodies into your base to get a 5 HP base off the field. But hear me out. What happens when they play any of the units that can link with Char and then play Char on top of it? What you get here now is a swing that cannot be blocked, will one-shot your base, and then they have 3 swings on the board still that can now take out up to 3 shields unless you have a base or a valid burst within your life. This is how this deck operates. So the quickest way, the best way to avoid yourself getting half of your shields chunked out in a turn is to make sure that these weenies go as soon as possible. They swing, take them out. If you can rest them, take them out. If you can burn them out of the game. But do not let them sit and wait for a unit that is capable of removing your base, or a pilot that is capable of resting your blocker, so they can all go in without fear of being smited off the board. This is not the way. So with this being said, now you have essentially the focus on taking down board and then pecking at life. Now granted, if you can, you, like I said, you always do want to take out these bodies on board and then go for life, but you don't want to ignore life altogether. If you have an attack, unless there's a specific reason you don't want to rest this body, it is very, very good just to send that attack into their life. Now, their shields. The thing about this deck, though, is that it only has 2 iterations of pilots, 4 copies of pilots in most cases, and that's going to be really hard to work with. Granted, most of the time it's just Char, most of the time it's just Amuro, but they can tech in Makuves as well to give Xeon units breach and a little extra oomph in order to go face and shields at the same time. Now, the thing you want to be careful about is that seeing that these are all pure pilots, there is always the risk that if you haven't seen a pilot yet and the aggro has been kind of slow, you might give them the pilot by swinging at life. Not something that can really discourage you from swinging at life, but it's something you want to keep in the back of your head. If you're thinking to yourself, man, the only thing that would mess me up right now is them hitting a Char and the Char giving something high maneuver and my base being taken out and then 4 of my shields being lost, maybe it's not the best time to simply swing at their life, as that Char could be on the top. If they're at 3 cards in hand but haven't been ever linking, have been stalled by a base and a blocker, you might not want to open up the only zone that they can't freely access themselves in order to give them additional chances of getting said pilot. Now, that being said, now that we have this out of the way, keeping your life as high as possible obviously is the best defense against this deck, and that defense comes in the way of clearing said board. Not going to rehash that again, but if your deck is if it's ready to deal with this sort of aggression, then you should have ways to get at these bodies before they can turn sideways, or hopefully ways to get at them the moment they do turn sideways, which is a little too late, but you do what you can do. Now, the other thing here, right, is in some games you might not care too much about your bases. You might discard them off of overflowing affection. You know, you might discard them with your Benagers when or your unicorn modes when you get the Benager to come back to your hand. But in this matchup, bases are to be prioritized, because in most cases, the only way that they are breaking bases is with a link. They need to put Char underneath something, they need to put Amuro underneath something, and they need to swing at that base. If they don't have those, then a base will soak up a good 2 to 3 attacks on their own, preventing a lot of damage from going through and the game to be elongated by turns. So yes, prioritize your bases. Your bases are stronger than ever. If your locals or tournament is saturated with this one-year war aggro deck, then perhaps you need to look at how many bases you have in your deck and, you know, plan accordingly, because at the end of the day, they are a draw. You don't have to play a base that does nothing. If you're in blue, you could play Corsica if you want to play bases but also still apply pressure. There's a lot of things you can do here. Now, the next part I want to say here is that once again, we have to hammer it in. Deck choice is going to be a factor. Once again, I can't stress it enough, you just can't play slower decks if this deck is the one that you're fearing the most. Chances are, if your deck is good because of its late game prowess, it will never be great in getting matched up into this deck. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about when it comes to this is going to be the fact that once your life is at like 0, once your shields are at 0, or maybe you have 1 shield left and no base, you have to start playing a little reckless. Getting rid of their bodies is always going to be the way to make sure you don't get clapped, but especially if you're sitting at 0 shields and no base, you kind of just have to start trying to close game as rapidly as possible. Yes, you're still going to try to keep in mind to smash into certain things and then go in, but it only takes 1 link. It's like any other deck. It only takes 1 link to just immediately end your game. What's worse is that this deck usually employs Char's Gelgoog or any number of things that link with Char, allowing them to have incredible top deck potential. They top deck a Char, immediately they may have something that comes in and immediately just can't be blocked. They have a Xeon unit and a Xeon unit or Neo Xeon unit, I believe, and then have Char's Gelgoog in hand, or they top deck Char's Gelgoog over there, or they're holding Char's Gelgoog and they top deck the unit. Bam, they have a high maneuver swing that is pretty heavy. So once you get down to 0, it is a very precarious game, because this deck is made to come off the top with a 2-card combination, and that could be really rough. But yeah, this is pretty much essentially going to be the best way you can hedge your bets against this deck. They are not prone to bricking, but bricking is something that can happen. If you've played against this deck a lot and feel like it's been 50-50, or feel like, you know, you've gotten stomped but you've won a couple, just think about how many times you've won and it's been because they never saw an Amuro, or they never saw a Shard but they saw one Amuro, or they never saw pilots in general. 8 pilots in a deck with no draw power is an insane way to go about these things, and if they don't see a Shard, they generally don't have high maneuver. But that being said, I do want to point out that between all the things that Shard can link with, and Shard and G-Fighter and Amuro, this deck has quite a few high maneuver cards. So even when you're playing blockers, that's kind of the issue with the white-blue blocker deck against this deck, because they can actually hammer you pretty hard, pause, and then you play a singular blocker, which gets Amuro'd. Then you're sitting at barely any shields, and they start hitting you with high maneuver as many times as they can, and then bam, you're having problems of your own at that point, or you've just flat out lost the game. So you got to be careful with that. You got to make sure you know what you're doing with that, and you have to keep yourself safe and attempt to whittle down their board at all times so that you can hopefully stabilize. Like if you get to your late game where you're playing your most impactful cards and you got 3 shields left, I think that's normally a game you're probably going to win against them in a lot of cases. But yeah, when you're stabilizing with 1 shield or no shield, yeah, dog, pack it up, is game. They have to start bricking in order for you to win after that. So yeah, and a whole other thing that's going to happen too often for a lot of players is that when you sit here, right, and you have your barely any shields, 1 or 0 shields, and they play 3 bodies. They could be 1/1 bodies, but most decks don't have a way to attack active, to rest these things, swing into them, or to burn them, meaning that no matter what you do, one of these attacks is going to get through next turn and end your day. Now when you have the blockers, I guess that's another layer of protection, provided they don't draw a Gelgoog and have another card in hand, things like that. But this is the situation they kind of put you in often, and it kind of sucks. But that being said, that is pretty much the rundown on how to best operate versus this green-blue 1-year war aggro. So let's talk about the matchups real quick, and then we're gonna close out the video. So when it comes down to it, I think if we're talking about the meta, when it comes to fighting against this deck, we've already hammered that green-white Gundam wing is not going to be well positioned. Yes, if they brick and you curve out on your blockers, and then you get a death scythe, you start picking off their bodies, and you play wing 0 and you annihilate their board, yeah, you're gonna get there. But in lots of cases, if they don't brick, you're just kind of toast. Then we're gonna go over to the white-blue blockers. I think that white-blue blockers can definitely curve out blockers onto the board and then pretty much stave off the aggression. However, if you don't see enough blocker density there, or eventually enough strikes with Kira's, there is like a world where you get an Archangel up that protects you and allows your strike Gundam to take out a weenie per turn while untapping itself. There are some things that can happen, but in a lot of cases, if you guys are both drawing well, you're going to have a balanced kind of mix between cards that do good things and blockers, whereas they're going to be able to flood the board, get in some easy damage, start resting your only blocker on the board, hit around it, and then start hitting you with high-mo as many times as possible. So that can get a little cumbersome. Then you get to, I want to touch on the mirror real quick. The mirror is always going to be weird between 2 hyper-aggressive decks, because you're used to just ignoring pretty much everything on board and going face no matter what. But once 2 hyper-aggressive decks, especially ones with the same tools, meet, they're going to have to slow down and start attacking each other's bodies, turning your offensive power into a half-half split between offensive push and defensive board clearing. And that's going to be kind of an issue that takes a little bit of work to navigate, and it takes a lot of problem solving, and you're gonna have to get used to that matchup because it requires you to switch gears completely. Then you have the blue-red matchup, which I think is going to be the best matchup going into this. If you hate green-blue aggro, you probably should be playing blue-red tempo. You guys can operate in somewhat of a similar aggressive space, but then your mid game starts turning into a lot of board clear while making bodies, which is really going to impede upon their quality of play. Now, once you get down to tier, 1.5, you got some decks that can combat it. If you have a lower to the ground green deck green white wing deck that focuses more on Shenlong and Wu Fei, you can have some better results against this deck in particular. Mind you though, you are getting rid of some of the things that cause this deck to be such a late game powerhouse and destroy most mid-range decks, as well as like the very popular white blue decks. Another deck that goes pretty well against this one, but I wouldn't consider meta, is white, well, it's like blue-based Federation decks. You can kind of splash any color into it. I know my own personal has a very small white splash, but I feel like the Federation decks have so much repair and so much ability to rest small things that you're going to be able to pick off the board while maintaining your own board fairly easily. And that becomes a very big nuisance for this green-blue aggro deck. And then you also have like white red seed, which is going to be able to do quite a bit. Fill up the field with blockers, has a very strong presence in game, but also because of Atherin has the ability to attack into active mode bodies and can really pick off the field and then shut out the game despite not being a meta deck. And those are going to be the kind of things that go into that. But the last thing I want to say here is thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you found it informative. I hope it ups your game, and I really hope that it allows you to step into a better competitive space. Let me know if there's a particular deck in the meta you want me to do this with next, but I will be making my rounds. I love making Gundam the card game content, and I will continue. And we're gonna have some more gameplay up soon. I go through like at least three locals a week, so I try to find some really cool games. I'm gonna start hitting up the finals of each of my locals, see if they want to be recorded, and really just kind of give some locals some shine while putting it up on the channel for you guys all to see, commentating it, doing all these things. And I hope you guys are excited for more content in the future. Last but not least, I want to give a special shout out to my Patreon members for helping support the brand outside of the platform. And I want to give a special warm welcome to 2 brand new members. There's Twajai L. I hope I didn't pronounce that wrong. And then there is a Pierce N. I want to thank you guys for both joining. I hope you guys enjoyed the content I have on there for Gundam so far, and there will be much more to come in the future. So thank you guys. I will see you in the next video. Remember to go down in the description, check out all the links, my sponsors, the guys that hold tournaments for this on Webcam, as well as my second channel, EagleX, where I play video games, live stream, talk about anime, talk about manga, all these things. Thank you guys, and I will see you later. Peace.